George, welcome to the Lead, Learn, Grow podcast. Thanks for coming on today.
Thanks, Robin. Glad to be here.
Yeah, so I've given the audience a sense of who you are and what you do, and maybe I'd like to start with your first day at Wells-Coleman. Can you paint a picture of what that was like and what the circumstances were and how you got into the world of accounting?
Sure. So, way back when I was a much younger buck, my mom was an office manager for a small business. And so part of her having that role was she incorporated her kids into the functions of that business. And so I fell in love with small business. And in high school, I took accounting one and accounting two. And then I realized that accounting was a great avenue to get admitted into the FBI. And so my dream was to be an FBI agent working on white collar crime. So I went to school at Mary Washington, and in my senior year, our professor asked if someone would like to work for a CPA firm in Richmond, Virginia. So I applied at the firm, was interviewed, and told that at that time I wasn't what the firm was looking for. Essentially, it was December timeframe. They were looking for a CPA type to come in January and work during busy season. Well, a month later, I got a call back from that firm, and they said there's been a change in circumstances, and they offered me the job that they had previously not offered. So, of course, I thought whoever they hired, they had already terminated them, and this was one cutthroat operation. But I was kind of desperate. I grew up in Northern Virginia. I went to school in Fredericksburg, and I did not want to go north. I would definitely wanted to go south to get away from the traffic and the hustle. So I took the job immediately. Had to rearrange all my courses to be night classes so that way I could work, a normal busy season, tax season schedule. And I got the school and the firm to agree to make 3 credit hours an internship for me. So that was my experience starting out at the firm. The first client that they put me on happened to be the one Fredericksburg client we had, which was the Freelance Star. It was the big newspaper in Fredericksburg, Virginia. So I didn't have to travel far my first few weeks as I worked on that audit and right in my college hometown of Fredericksburg, Virginia.
So you start at Wells-Coleman, you're graduating from Mary Washington. When did you decide you didn't want to be like a secret agent anymore? You didn't want to be with the FBI?
Yeah, so there might be a theme here. I never decided I didn't want to do it. I took the entrance exam. And so in Richmond, there's an FBI headquarters or location. And I set up a meeting and I took the entrance exam, which is really like if I recall, it's more of like a souped up Myers-Briggs personality type
Mhm.
questionnaire. And they were like, yeah, you don't have what it takes. And so that ended that dream, but at least I felt 2 things. Number one, I was like, I followed through on something that I had felt I always wanted. I was about 2 years into my role at Wells-Coleman at the time. As I recall, there was either an age requirement or an experience requirement with the FBI, and at that time when they're like, yeah, you're not it, I took a step back and I was like, you know what? I'm really liking and enjoying what I'm doing. And that was probably the first time I truly thought about, public accounting as my chosen path, permanent path, if you will.
Yeah, and think about like what are the odds? Because we were trying to do the math here before we started recording, like 28 years or so. Like, what are the odds that you start in a firm and today you're the managing director? Like, does that sort of blow your mind?
It's definitely unusual. I mean, and we hire people all the time, and I feel like the norm these days is it's not abnormal to spend 2 years somewhere and then move on to a new role. I think a lot of times people feel that the only way they can grow is to do so outside of the organization that they're in. Here, I've been blessed with, if you want to do it, take the reins and we'll let you do it as long as you don't mess it up. And it seems that they continue to let me try to do different things. And so yeah, that's kept me here and engaged.
So I know you've been involved in lots of leadership pursuits, and I mean, I don't know what the norm is for an accounting firm, but I feel like you've taken a leadership role at a relatively young age, I would guess, compared to other firms. I don't know that. Who were some of the mentors? Like, how did you, like, it's one thing to be an accountant and be on staff and slog through, but it's another thing to sort of lead the operation. So I'm sure there were some mentors along the way.
Sure.
Who were they and what'd you learn?
Yeah, so I became a partner at the firm at age 27, which is definitely abnormal. And I'm not suggesting that I'm the unicorn. I was in the right place at the right time. Wells and Coleman were two college buddies from University of South Carolina, and Wells, his father, had this little accounting firm in Richmond, and he took ill, and Wells was going to come home and take over his daddy's firm. So he asked his college buddy, John Coleman. He said, "Look, you want to go run an accounting firm with me in Richmond, Virginia?" And so they came back, and I think Wells's father passed within a relatively short period of time, 3 months, 6 months, something of that nature. But these two guys had kind of a value system or a priority system that looked a little bit like this. And keep in mind, this is 70 years ago, and it's in somewhat the South. They would spend much of the mornings hunting and fishing. Then, after the hunt, they would have an early afternoon cocktail. Then they would go back to the office. They'd order a pizza, and they would work until 8 or 9 at night getting the work done. And this was like rinse repeat every day. That was what they did. So we came along in the firm, and we didn't have that schedule ourselves, but we got to witness what it meant to work hard and play hard. And so, like, we're very big on our firm culture, and our culture means just that: work hard, play hard. While we're not out hunting and fishing every morning, and the internet and the speed of business has us a little bit more accountable, we've tried to preserve that part of them that's kind of woven into the fabric of the firm. And it's very much a family oriented operation. um, and so John Coleman, not necessarily by choice or by any type of structure, he became my de facto mentor. And so he was the managing partner who managed the firm operations, and Wells was the business development guy. So he was always out and about, shaking hands, bringing in work, and then John would be required to, like, find a way to get that work done. And so I worked very closely with Mr. Coleman, and got to he let me, he didn't offer me, he let me take on more and more, and really never said no. And over time I had found that I had a ton of opportunities that other people didn't have, largely because I asked if I could do it, and he was like, "Sure, why not?" And then he would correct me along the way, and that's kind of how it went. And so I'd put him as probably my biggest mentor, but not from the standpoint of like a very active or strategic or proactive mentor. He never got in my way, never said no, and was always there to kind of help me resolve challenges and issues, which worked very well for us.
What are some of the big changes you've seen in, like, I can imagine in 28 years, accounting has changed dramatically. Like, I think about, and this is, I'm sure, I'm 100% sure this is wrong, but I think about like ledgers and,
Hmm.
things like that. And now we're talking about, like, will accounting be replaced by AI? Do we
Sure.
need, like, so what's been sort of the arc of change that
Yeah.
you've seen, and where do you think things are going?
So when I was picking my path, if you will, the one thing that I had said I never wanted to do was like technology. So my dad was a computer programmer, and he learned that trade, and he was in the Marines for 8 years and left and did stuff for, like, the government up around DC, and always in programming. And I just saw, like, I don't know, it just seemed like he was always in an office by himself, plugging away on the keyboard. And I was like, I never want to do that. That said, our family was very like technology oriented because that was the one of that was his passion. So at Wells Coleman, staff accountant for a few years, and then after about a year and a half or 2 years, I was asked to help some small businesses set up their first accounting system. And so it used to be, and for many years, a lot of our clients used, they were called green sheets, these old safeguard ledger sheets where there were carbon paper behind it, and they would write their checks, and it would then also go in the ledger. And then at the end of every month or the end of every page, you'd add up all the totals and columns and crossfoot them. And so QuickBooks was, newish on the scene. This is back in the mid 90s. And so I began helping clients set up their accounting system. And so to this point in time, I've probably helped over 500 small businesses establish their accounting systems. Probably to the point to where I take it for granted. I know it, like I know that software specifically like the back of my hand, to where I don't necessarily appreciate the challenge and burden that others go through when they're converting to it for the first time. But that being said, the biggest change was, just computer and the using software to do your accounting. So shortly thereafter, this little itch in IT started to grow. And so I went back to Wells and Coleman and I said, hey guys, I've got an idea for you. How about you send me to the University of Virginia, the McIntire School of Commerce, and pay for me to get a master's in information systems? And at the time, I want to say that was like a year-long program. It was an executive track. Every other Friday, Saturday, you spent the night in Charlottesville. And it was something like $30,000 back then. And then this was back in the upper 90s. And they were like, all right, we'll do that. And I was shocked that they were willing to make that big of an investment at that time. And at home, my girlfriend, fiance at the time, now wife, was getting a master's in public administration from VCU. And so her program lasted all of about 3 to 4 years. Well, here I come flying through, and in 10 months, I've got a master's degree from UVA in IT. And so I brought that back to the firm and said, let's use this not necessarily to start up an IT consulting division, but really to place our firm near the front edge of IT. And so we've always been a little bit behind the people taking the arrows. We're not cutting edge, bleeding edge, but we're right behind them. And so we moved on very quickly to cloud-based technology. We started using encrypted email probably 5 to 7 years before it became mainstream. And so we've used that approach over the years to either make our operation more secure or to lift the burden of our people. And so as we fast forward to today, the things that we're doing, we've hired our first RPA developer. That's robotic process automation, where we're writing scripts and bots in order to automate routine tasks on a daily, weekly, monthly basis. We've hired data scientists to build out certain aspects of our firm, so that way there's automation in places that are, you wouldn't think you could automate. And so I've seen technology really transform the profession from the original safeguard green sheets handwriting all the way to more of an automation based approach. But the only reason why I feel that you go that journey is so that way you get good data and good information to make the best decision possible for your business. And probably the biggest issue I see or downside is a lot of people run their small business by the seat of their pants, by their gut. And some people have very good instincts and very good gut reactions. Other people don't. And I feel like, it is pretty much proven that if you make data-based decisions routinely, you're going to more likely make better decisions and have better results. And that's something that we believe in at Wells Coleman.
And by the way, for you young folks, a check is something that you write and it's actually like money. So back in the day, will clear that up. So, George, you can't stay out on the cutting edge without being a learner. And I think part of, at least I see it in the work that I do, I think part of being innovative and creative is really tied heavily to learning. So how do you because the things you just described are, look, I mean, I don't know if, like you said, I don't know if it's like tip of the spear, but it's very innovative. Like you're engaged with data scientists and you're thinking about robotic learning and or automated learning and AI kinds of things. Like, how do you personally stay abreast and continue to learn and stay in front of things?
Sure. So I don't know if it comes across in a Zoom, but I think I'm a fairly extroverted person. And part of that extroversion is I find energy in interactions with other people. And so over the years, I have gotten involved in the profession. So at the most local level here in Virginia, we have the Virginia Society of CPAs. And so that's our, statewide charter of all the, the bean counters in Virginia. And so I've gotten involved in their board and in their leadership. And I stepped down in I think it was early May, as the chair for the Virginia Society of CPAs for the past year. Prior to that, I was on committees at the AICPA, and they have a small business committee called PCPS, the Private Companies Practice Section. And so what I found was, as I interacted with others, my peers, and engage in the profession, the good, the bad, the ugly, and what our challenges are and how we go about it, what you find is as soon as people find that you're not a threat to them, they let their guard down and they're willing to share. And so those interactions of sharing and dialoguing about anything and everything is how we've kind of synthesized what might work here at Wells-Coleman. And most people, they love to talk about what they've tried, whether it was a success or a failure. Generally, there's a reticence if you're talking to your competitor across the street. And so I feel like I've gotten a lot of that in my time at Wells-Coleman and in leadership. And more recently, our firm has joined a national, like a global accounting firms alliance. We're not owned by that global firm, but they offer, an alliance or a membership that you can partake in. And basically, I'm in a roundtable of 12 managing partners all across the globe. And I asked at the beginning, when I am put in a group, that I want to be put in a group with firms that are significantly larger than our firm. So that way I know that I'm going to have an opportunity to learn from sort of the big boys and girls. And that experience has proven just absolutely invaluable, learning what they're doing. And, the war right now is a war for talent. Like, with the economy and post-COVID, there is no shortage of work to be found. There is a shortage of talent. And so we are engaging actively in how we can find good people, how we can take burden off of the good people we have, and how we can be innovative and strategic. And sort of the movement these days is much more automation. You have offshoring, inshoring, outsourcing, all these different concepts. And our firm, we're trying every single one of them. We're not wed to just one silver bullet that's going to solve everything. But offshoring to India, the Philippines, other countries it's really on the rise. Because if you look at the data, going back to database decisions, the population is shrinking, and the only places where it's growing is in sub-Saharan Africa and also in India. So if you have a growing enterprise in an area with less people and less people coming, you're going to have to be innovative and start to look to where you can find that talent. And so those are the things we're doing. And that's how I feel like I'm finding these new ideas, is by my interactions in boards, committees, and roundtables that I participate in, as well as reading. Certainly lots of articles, journals, and things of that nature. But I get my best sources from others.
And I think for the folks that are listening, like regardless of what you do, like there there's there's no leadership endeavor that does not involve the kinds of things George just spoke about. I think it's a good question to ask, like who are you affiliating with? Who are you engaged with? And are you really engaged? I mean, it strikes me that you're a dive deep person, jump in with both feet. And I think it matters, and I think it makes a difference. So I appreciate you sharing that.
Sure.
Um, so being a being a CPA and doing the work that you guys do, again, I think to some it's about numbers and spreadsheets and QuickBooks and all that, but I think it's more of a of an creative endeavor. Like talk about how Wells Coleman thinks about accounting and helping small businesses, and because I know there's a more of an advisory coaching aspect that goes beyond the numbers. I'm curious how you would describe how your firm works with small businesses in that way.
Sure. Um, so traditional accounting firms are very sort of need based. So everyone that has a job and earns a little bit of income has to file a tax return. And so the need is, I need to file this return by the spring of every year. And so that creates an opportunity for a relationship. And so as I was coming along, it was very easy to sell a service of individual tax prep. Um, as we've kind of clarified where we want to be as a firm and where, Mac Wells and John Coleman kind of started, it was, we focus on small businesses. We focus on the owners of those small businesses. We focus on, high net worth individuals, and we also focus on our not-for-profit community here in Richmond. And so what we found was, by really focusing on those small businesses, we were able to have the biggest impact. And focusing on those small businesses wasn't just a once a year touch. It was being available as they encountered challenges, issues, successes, that we were there to be a cheerleader at times, a coach at times. And really what I found is, we've become often the first call, meaning when someone is experiencing something new, rather than spend a lot of time researching and investigating it, they might say, hey, I'm going to call Wells Coleman and see if they can point me in the right direction. And what that does is it means that we've had a tremendous amount of experiences beyond just tax returns and debits and credits. And so our clients have come to rely on that and appreciate that. And so we've made that more of our core focus. And so, most people have probably watched the TED Talk on Simon Sinek, where he talks about how great leaders inspire. That's all about finding your why, that people don't buy what you do, they buy why you do it. So our why at Wells Coleman is to make a difference in the lives of our clients, our people, and our community, and to have fun in the process. And so part of that making a difference isn't just offering a commodity and a tax return. It's through offering advice and guidance. And so we've not, I don't want to say pivoted, but we've greatly clarified and simplified our role to be, we're here to offer advice and be a part of, people's strategic plans, whether it's their business or their personal plans. And right now we're finding that that is the most successful endeavor that we've made to date. It's rewarding. People appreciate it. They're not going to say, hey, you're the cheapest firm in town. What they're probably going to say is, I pay you a decent amount, but I get a lot for it. And that's basically where we want to be. We want to be a value to those that we serve, and we want it to be fun and enjoyable.
Yeah, and I would say I said before we started recording, I didn't want to be, over the top on this, but we're one of your clients, and as I think about how you've described that, it's funny how now Monica may think about it in a different way, but I think about it like I don't think about the numbers and the books and all that. I think about like when I have a perplexing problem that involves something about the direction our business is going, and it may not be directly financial either. I think about George as one of my coaches. Like George is somebody that, like you said, the first call, like let me many times around the house. It's like, well, let's ask George. Well, let's see what George says. I'm not going to say anything until George says something. And it's certainly not the least expensive option that we could have, but in the long run, maybe it is. And so it's really opened my eyes to really what a great accounting firm, how they can serve small business, because it's really different than maybe what I had before. Um, so let me dig in a little, maybe a little more specific, because I think the folks that are listening, you're thinking, well, gosh, my accountant does my books, and I don't know, what am I missing? I'd love to hear you, George, riff a little bit on what are some of the what are some of the things when you start working with a small business for the first time? Like, what are some of the common mistakes, or what are some of the obvious things that people maybe are blind to that you see a lot? Does that make
Mhm.
sense?
Yeah. So I would say that probably the biggest sin out there is people go to parties, cocktail events, and they talk about their business, and they hear others talk about what they do, what they've done, and how they've deducted, and they build this knowledge base of bad info on things that they think they can do, they're convinced they can do. And so part of how we approach it, and it's easiest with somebody that's starting a new business, is so we put together a little white paper that's on our website, but basically it's like a entrepreneur startup guide, and it's basically, here are the things to focus on to start your business up correctly. But whether you're already in business or starting up, I think that a successful relationship with your CPA starts with a conversation about what you can do and what you can't do. And so the Internal Revenue Code makes very clear how to treat stuff. And we typically look at it as it's black and it's white. And in between things that are a little fuzzy, that's the infamous gray area. We talk about those things. And that gray area really comes down to like risk reward. It's, you're welcome to proceed, but you proceed with caution. And by proceeding with caution, it means that maybe the IRS questions something you've done, but you're not surprised, nor are you prepared. Nor are you not prepared, meaning if they disallow something, you're kind of ready for that. But the statistics and the data is that there are very few audits that are happening right now. And the way to get yourself audited is to kind of really do some wild, crazy stuff that jumps off the page. And so right now, post COVID, there has been so many resources made available to people and to small businesses, whether it be PPP, employee retention credit, lots of stimulus money. And for the most part, I think people were very honest and true. However, there have been a lot of misinformation provided, and there have been a lot of firms that have spun up to help people get money that they're really not entitled to.
Hmm.
And so there's a general worry about the IRS is going to audit me. And then there was recently the IRS is going to hire 86,000 agents. As clients have come to me and they've been sort of, lamenting this, I've said, look, this is a good thing. I'm not upset about them hiring 86,000 people if they go that route. And the reason is because there's been fraud and abuse that makes it harder for those that have followed those rules and those programs to the letter of the law. And so, as long as you take a really ethical approach to your business and your taxes, not saying you don't take deductions and things of that nature, but that you have a moral compass in that process, you will never have anything to worry about. And I think that's probably the biggest area to get on the same page with your CPA early on, is to talk about what your expectations are, what your risk reward balance is, and make sure that you align with the CPA. We value our ability to provide advice, and so we're never going to do something that jeopardizes our license. But certainly, we learn where our clients are positioned, so that way we help them make decisions based on where they stand. And so that's been our way, and that's been probably the biggest challenge with folks, is the misinformation that exists just by talking to peers and others, and thinking that they know more than you, because I can tell you, in most cases, they don't. A great resource right now, speaking of technology and automation, Chat GPT. Part of that alliance that we've been a part of, when we have client issues that are really technical and challenging, we can reach out, and we reach out and they offer the support, but they do so at a fee. And so we had a client that had some pretty complicated stuff in the area of, they got bank financing that included stock warrants. And so for probably some much better CPAs than me, they're like, oh, that's easy. Well, it wasn't easy for us. So we reached out to our alliance, we got the advice of how to treat it, and we paid them, let's say, $2,500 for their consult. Okay, great. Chat GPT comes out, and I think, wow, I want to see how smart this thing is. And I'm like, Chat, tell me how to account for stock warrants. And in 30 seconds, it gave me everything that I had paid $2,500 for. And so I say this as people want to know what you can do and what you can't do, you'd be amazed at how spot on Chat GPT is, and not to use it as the Bible, but certainly to use it as your first resource of any information gathering in lots of areas, but specifically small business accounting and taxes.
Yeah, we could talk about that. In fact, I may come back to it. But I do want to ask you, like, I feel like the title of your first book is looming somewhere. So tell me, what is the craziest thing that you've ever heard? Like, I was at a barbecue and my buddy who owns his business, he's
Yeah.
doing, yeah, what's the craziest one you've ever
Wow.
heard?
The craziest. So it's funny. Like, I've become completely desensitized to this. So crazy is like not part of the description, but I'd say that, like, right now, so the IRS says you cannot deduct club dues. So if you belong to the Country Club of Virginia and you pay them $1,000 a month, that is absolutely not a tax deduction. You can pay for it out of your business, but when you go to file your business tax return, you cannot claim a deduction for it. So I have people that are convinced that they can do it, and they pay for it from their business, and they do things like they bury it in creative little areas on their books, so that way they hope that I don't see it. That way they somehow get a deduction for it. One of the things to know is that by default, your CPA is not auditing you. They're taking the information that you give them. They are looking at it, they are thinking about it, and then they're processing it and putting it on a tax return. And so there, it is not the role to uncover all the sneaky little things that can happen, or any inadvertent things that happen. But generally, we're looking for known obvious things to advise you, so you don't get yourself in trouble. And so I see that a lot. I had one client tell me that he is 100% deductible, that everything he does is a tax deduction. That's been fun. And so he's a bit of an old timer, an old crusty contractor. And so what I've learned over the years is I just say yes, but when I prepare his return, I don't deduct all the things that he gives me that he can't deduct. And he doesn't know any different. He just likes to blow a lot of steam and smoke. And so I file his return the right way, but I let him believe that he's getting one over on the government. It's a little bit of massaging the
Yeah,
relationship, if you will.
yeah, so the title of the book might be Can I Deduct My Member Guest or something. So
Absolutely.
crazy.
Absolutely.
Um, yeah, so let me shift. I'd really like to talk to you. Maybe we'll do it some other day. But Chat GPT is something that I think folks in the business world in general, like I'm actually doing a training class. I'm probably going to do it in early October. And I'm going to get my ongoing mastery level clients, and we're going to do an entire class, and it's going to be sales role play
Mhm.
using Chat GPT, and I've been playing with it, and it's actually amazing. Like it's like, I can tell Chat GPT to be a skeptical prospect, and I can give them an industry and a pain point, and then I can start engaging. I can even say, I'm selling with Sandler methodology, and I can ask Chat GPT to suggest, maybe what should I have said, or I can say, hey, Chat, how did I do? Did I miss anything? And it's actually remarkable. And so it reminds me, and it's what I tell my clients is like, look, sales trainers or salespeople or accountants, or you're not going to be replaced by Chat GPT, but I suspect you might be replaced by sales trainers who use AI and Chat GPT. So I think it's incumbent for everybody to dig into that and learn and figure out what's in it for you. So, George, as we start for the exit ramp, um, I know you're an adventurous type person. You've talked about, from an early age, sort of work hard, play hard kind of a culture. But how, you know, talk about some of your passions for adventure and exploration outside of the office. And then how do you think that spirit helps you, maybe in terms of like solving complex problems or showing up better at work? Like, is there any tie-in at all?
Yeah. So I had I don't know if it was a midlife crisis or not, but one of my business coaches said it was. But I'd read this book by Stu Friedman, and it was all about leadership, and the concept of a four-way win was the premise of his book. And the four-way win was you will feel and be most rewarded when you overlap four areas of your life. And so you've got the self, you've got family, you've got work, and you've got your community. And so in reading his book and in applying it, if you're very compartmentalized, like this hour is going to be just my family and this hour is going to be just work, you can get spread really thin. So what I did is I said, let me find a way to start overlapping some of these areas. And so started out with one client, and we went and we hiked the rim to rim of the Grand Canyon. Client 10 years older than me. He actually is one of my best buddies now. He's my personal dentist. I'm his accountant. And so on this hike to the bottom of the Grand Canyon and then up the other side over a few days, we talked about like, how big could we make this, or did we desire to make it bigger? And we did. And so as we successfully completed that, we then moved on to Mount Kilimanjaro in Africa. We went to Rainier out in Washington State. Last summer, we were up in Banff, up outside of up in Canada, outside of Calgary. And then a week and a half ago, I just got back from 8 days in Iceland hiking the highlands. And so each of these trips has been a group of eight. Six-ish have been clients of our firm. And basically, these are all guys that are generally small business owners that have a love of the outdoors and hiking. And we get together once a year, maybe once every other year, depending on the year and situations. And we hike. And while we're there, we've formed bonds, and we talk about our businesses and we talk about challenges. And really, what it is it's become a little bit like it's another roundtable. It's a very different group. The ages vary. The youngest guy is probably in early 40s, and the oldest is probably almost 60. But just been a great brotherhood of small business owners and doing something that they like. And so going back to Stu Friedman's book, when you talk about like the four-way win, this wouldn't be a four-way win because it's not, well, for some of them it would, because one of the guys that isn't a client is the brother of my dentist buddy. So a four-way win would include doing something for yourself, something with your family, so his brother, doing something in your like profession, so he's got business contacts, and then doing something in your community. And so when you put all those together on one event, it's like it's a four-way win. And so that group has become special to me, and it's not the only group that I participate in, but I have a lot of work communities like that where we're integrating business in something like personal. So as an example, this weekend on Sunday, I'm going to go fly fishing in the bay with a chef buddy of mine, client here in town. I was talking to him yesterday, catching up on his business. And he's like, hey, you want to go sight casting for cobia? And I'm like, when? He's like, Sunday. Done. And so we're going to go do that. And while we're doing that, we're not just going to be talking about how pretty it is out on the bay. We're going to be talking about his business. We'll be talking about accounting, and we'll both be complaining and joking and all that stuff. But we're both going to leave that, whether we catch one fish or not, we're going to both leave it feeling like, wow, what a great way to spend a day. And so I'm looking forward to that. And I feel like that's something that is unique maybe to our profession, where we have the opportunities to do those things. And to me, I get a lot of energy and a lot of excitement out of that. And I'll come back with ideas, and we'll rinse and repeat, and that's the way it'll go.
Yeah, that's fantastic. But the big question is, can I deduct my trips to Iceland 100%? That's the really big question.
So I'll give you the coined phrase. It all depends, Robin.
Yeah, right. Thank you. Thank you. It depends. Do you value freedom? Do you like waking up in your home every day? No, that's really good. Such a great take. Love that. So, George, we're towards the end. So, tell folks, this is different. I don't often say this to guests, but I want you to share your Instagram handle, because I know you put a lot of you've got some amazing pictures that you have, especially from your recent trip that I happened to see. So tell folks like how to find you,
Sure.
if they wanted to reach out to you with questions, like how's all that work? So just talk a little
So
bit about you and the
yeah.
firm.
So our firm is Wells-Coleman. Probably the easiest way to reach us is wellscoleman.com. You go out there, it'll have our team, and you'll see my little picture. And there's a contact us feature on the website. As far as Instagram, I have two children. One is a sophomore at the University of Georgia, living his best life. And the other one is a senior here in Richmond at James River High School. They have told me that you can't have more posts than you do followers, which is apparently a social media sin that
Hmm.
I have indulged in. But my Instagram handle is George_Forsythe. And so, yeah, so I use that as mainly just, it's really my sort of my photo journal, and it's more for me to remember all the great experiences I've had. But I get the pleasure to share it with some friends, and have done so. Yeah.
Yeah, I'll actually put it in the show notes as I think about it. And I'll also put how you can contact George on LinkedIn, and I'll put the website in the show notes, and also the entrepreneurial, excuse me, the entrepreneurial startup guide. I'll stick that in there as well. So George, thank you so much. Is there anything we didn't talk about that we should have spoken about today? Any final words for the audience?
I think you covered it fully. Thank you, Robin. I appreciate you having me on.
Very good. George, thanks for spending some time with us.